Hello, everyone, and hello, Sarah. Welcome to a new episode of the Awakened Woman podcast. I'm your host, Ale, and in today's episode, I'm with Sarah Middlemass, who is a channel for divine light and a spiritual mentor and guide. I will let her introduce herself a little bit after the intro. So, in today's episode, we will talk about feminine and masculine energies, which is a topic that is been coming up quite a lot recently. I feel we are, in society at the moment going through a big shift and transformation and bringing a lot of light and awareness to this topic. Another part of this topic is also bringing the shadow and the light traits in both and how we can express both energies in healthy ways. And the reason why I decided to pick this topic, and even more importantly, to bring Sarah, who is a fellow coach. We both went through our life coaching certification in the same academy, and we've had multiple chats before. I worked with her as well, and I know how passionate she is about this topic. So I think it will be super interesting to know what her thoughts are, and just in general that deeper into this. So one of my biggest light bulb moments since I started deeper in my personal development journey came from my learning and better understanding of feminine and masculine energies and how they influence our intimate life and just our life in general. So just to give a quick intro of what feminine and masculine energies are. So feminine and masculine energies are basically represent of the expression and the traits that two energies, the two polarities in all human beings. So both women and men have these two polarities. So I'd like to identify them more as polarities, and maybe Sarah, you can also at some point tell me, how you identify better. And while is it common to associate the masculine energies with men and the feminine energies with women, is very important to just mention that this has nothing to do with genders and do not also dictate sexuality. So we all embody both, as I mentioned, and we generally will have a dominant or predominant core energy. And this is the energy that we want to operate from. So that's why it's super important to bring that awareness, right? To make sure that we are operating or embodying the predominant energy that we want to show up in life. And just the last part is the key here. What we want to cover with Sarah is to understand how we can express both energies in healthy ways, as I said, and how they complement each other to create polarity, because this is where the magic happens, when we learn to create that polarity. So Sarah, welcome, and tell us a little bit more about yourself, how you got into this topic, and just in general, what's your view on feminine and masculine energies?
Thank you for having me. This is actually my first podcast episode ever. I'm a podcast virgin. So I'm excited to be here. And as Ali mentioned, I'm a channel for divine light. So that just basically means that a lot of the work that I do is channeled through from higher frequencies, if you want to call that God, the divine, source, creator. I have this divine connection, which I channel wisdom and ancient codes through. And so alongside that, I also share pieces of my own journey through my own lived embodied experience. I would consider myself to be a spiritual mentor and guide. I also have connection to the priestess lineage. So there's lots of different moving pieces that really make up the work that I'm here to do. And it was funny when you were talking about, I'd love to hear more about how you found this, because actually it found me.
Yeah, wow.
A lot of what I've found throughout my journey is I respond to the intuitive pulse and the signs and the synchronicities and the pieces of information that are being delivered to me. So I would say it was around this time 2 years ago, autumn of 2020, that I really began my divine feminine journey. And it started off as divine feminine, because as you said, we've all got a predominant energy. And so for me, I'm very much in that feminine energy as my predominant energy. And that really looked like, for me, having to dive deep into the shadows, healing all the unhealthy traits of the feminine that I was holding within, to then be able to embody these healthier, more divine aspects within myself. And alongside that, I didn't really realize at the time that I was also healing the masculine traits within myself, because the masculine holds the feminine. We'll maybe get into a little bit more of that later, but the masculine holds the container for the feminine to really flourish and thrive and be creative and fully express. And so it was like this beautiful dance between the two. And it didn't always feel like that at the time when I was in the depths of the shadow, but it was all happening simultaneously. And really, I just allowed myself to be guided to wherever I needed to go. I allowed my intuition to guide me. And intuition, we can think of as a more feminine trait. The feminine is very intuitive. She's trusting in a healthy expression. But there is a certain element of intuition with the masculine as well. So for me, it feels like the feminine leads with the visionary and the intuition, and then the masculine comes and backs her up and holds that really safe space for her to fully bloom and blossom and express herself. So for me, it's been this, just this really beautiful journey of kind of coming to this place where I feel and recognize and remember, most importantly, this wholeness within myself, that it's always been there. It was just hidden beneath all of the conditioning, all of the stories, all of the wounds, all of the trauma, all of the pain that I needed to be able to heal first in order for me to find a deeper truth. So it really found me.
Wow.
Which is interesting.
Yeah, that's so powerful. And I think, as we embark ourselves into this journey, we understand that everything that comes into our life in a moment is because we are ready to face it. We're ready to learn. We're ready to transform. So nothing will ever come to our life without us being ready to face it. So I think this is very interesting, because so you started with the wounded feminine, right? You mentioned.
More conscious awareness of me healing the feminine, without really realizing alongside that I was also healing the masculine as well, because I wouldn't have been able to heal the feminine without having a certain level of inner masculine there to hold the space for me to do that. Exactly. And so part of my healing was me holding space for myself, and then finding mentorship around me that felt aligned, in order for me to have spaces where I felt really held and safe to do the healing work and to be expressed.
This is a really, really good example, because you started with your wounded feminine and I started with my wounded masculine, right? So for me, it was the other way around. For me, was always being, in the doing, in the controlling my life, controlling all the situations, being very resistant to new situations, to vulnerability, to depth, because of what I went through as a kid. So just letting myself and surrendering to that control took me first to go through my healing, because we cannot go through that control and resistance if we don't first feel the pain, because the resistance is not feeling the pain. That's why we want to keep ourselves protected, because I have this pain in me. I don't want to feel it again. So let me protect me. So the way to actually release it is in feeling that pain, and then you will start releasing that resistance and that kind of controlling energy, which is probably wounded masculine, I want to mention. So maybe we can both start talking about exactly how was our experience, so people can understand a little bit more, how we have in first place a wounded masculine and a wounded feminine energy. So whatever you would like to share, because I know this can get sometimes a little bit even more deep into trauma and what we went through. So what you feel like sharing or key parts in that in your journey.
Yeah, thank you. So just before we move on to that bit, I'd really just love to rewind for a second. It was really interesting just reflecting on you saying that it started with the wounded masculine for you. And just as you were sharing that, I could see this reflection, this mirror of both of our journeys, because there was elements of that for me, right? It was overgiving, people pleasing, exhaustion, burnout from trying to do so many different things. And so there was this element of both wounded and feminine masculine. And what is the medicine for that? It's the healthy feminine, it's the divine feminine. Like you said, it's the surrender, it's the flow, it's the trust, it's the intuition. And so the feminine really is the medicine. Maybe we'll get more into kind of that on a bigger scale in a little bit, but she's the medicine for all of it. When it's unhealthy masculine, she's the medicine for that, because she balances it out through the healthy traits, and alongside that the masculine's there as well, the divine masculine. So I don't ever really feel that it's just one or the other. There's always both in play. It's just that we're experiencing one more than the other at any given moment. I always like to think of it as like an infinity symbol. There's like this sweet balance spot in the middle where they both meet, but on one end there's the feminine and the other end is the masculine. We're constantly just swaying from one to the next, one to the next, one to the next, just dependent on the situation that we find ourselves in, what we're being guided or called to do, the energy that we need to embody in any moment. So you want to share a little bit more about wounded traits?
Yes, and probably just like a little bit of understanding and background on how people can identify, oh, maybe I have a wounded feminine, or maybe I have a wounded masculine.
Yeah, perfect. So if I maybe give some examples, I am a mother, and when we think of mother energy, divine mother energy, we often associate with feminine. The mother is the feminine. But actually, when we go deeper into the role of the mother, she's protective, she gives a lot, she's always there. They're inherently masculine traits: the protector, the provider. All of these different pieces are inherently masculine. But when we overdo that in that role of motherhood, it leads to exhaustion, it leads to overgiving, it leads to burnout, it leads to sometimes resentment, sometimes control, trying to control a situation. Because when we think of children, just an example, because we've all been children, when we were children, that's when we were in our purest essence. Children are inherently feminine. All children have this beautiful, healthy feminine energy. They're creative, they're imaginative, they're visionaries, they're light and free and flowing, they're intuitive, they allow themselves to be guided, but they're also present in the moment. So they just hold this beautiful synergy of the two energies together. And we can see this in every area of our lives, is that we've been taught to dominate and control and compete and be aggressive and really go out there and get it and be goal orientated and just move constantly without ever taking time to rest or to self-care or to pleasure ourselves, or do all these beautiful divine feminine practices that bring us back into harmony and balance. We're just taught to constantly give until we're completely empty and exhausted, and then we're resentful and bitter and angry, and we don't want to do it anymore because we're so exhausted. So those can be how the masculine really rears its head when it's in its unhealthy traits. It's about having dominance and control, and it's reactive. I mean, there's so many different traits, but I would say that those are the predominant ones in the way that it can show itself. For me, it really comes through as just exhaustion and burnout from all these other things, which then lead into more unhealthy traits the further you go down.
Yeah, 100%. I totally resonate with that. And I think a very important part where you mentioned, you know, when we are kids, because we all been kids, we are in our purest essence. So we are our most authentic selves. And usually it's the influences from external environments. And sadly, also sometimes our own parents, without even intentionally imposing that to ourselves, because their own things and their own trauma that they went through, is when we start losing that essence and we start disconnecting from our true nature and who we really are, because we want to fit in, because we want to fit in a mold, because we want to be seen, because we want to be heard. And as kids, we internalize a lot of the things that our parents are going through as, there's something wrong with me, I'm not enough, so therefore I'm gonna be a good girl, so then I'm seen and I'm valued and I'm loved. So we start then separating ourselves from that true nature, and that's when we start adopting these masks, that I will say. And then as we go in life, we keep putting more masks, and we keep putting more masks, and it could be also our first romantic relationships, if we didn't have good experiences with men. I don't know how was in your society and your culture, Sarah, but in the culture, South America, we usually grow up with a woman just saying, oh, but that's men, oh, but men is like that. No, men is not like that. There's a specific person, and we cannot generalize, and it's that generalization that creates limiting beliefs, as you and I know the impact of having limiting beliefs. And that's when we start building this mask and shield to protect us, and we become more in our masculine. And also when we see the side of the masculine, when they show emotions, when they are vulnerable, they are blamed, they are labeled as weak. So, and when women are assertive and showing control in their work, or being assertive and showing leadership, they're labeled as bossy. So it's really changing, not only our energies because of what we went through, but it's also challenging those society programming and everything that we've been told. So yeah, what's your view on that specifically, like society and all the limiting beliefs behind this topic?
Yeah, I mean, it's all built on a narrative. It's all built on a story. At the end of the day, everything that we create, any limitations that we place upon ourselves, stem from a story, like you say, of not being good enough, of needing to be validated, of being feeling like we're weak if we show emotion. It's all stories. And so the society that we've been raised in doesn't really allow us to be witnessed and received in our fullest expression of self. Like you say, when men show emotion, they're seen as weak. That is the healing that needs to be done. This is where the divine feminine comes into play. She comes to heal men and women through their heart space. But I would say that the divine feminine awakening is really, I feel like it comes to women first. The role has been handed to us first because we are predominantly feminine energy. The majority of women would be predominantly in feminine energy. I wouldn't know a statistic, but I would say predominantly women will be in feminine energy. And so it's fallen upon us first because there's an essence, especially when we come to spirituality, and this is a very, very spiritual concept, is that we will find in every relationship that we have, there is a leader for a certain aspect of our lives. So for men at the minute, they've been given the societal leadership role as the provider, the money maker, the one who provides for the family, this old paradigm, right? And for women, it's almost like we've taken on the torch of the spiritual leader. And so we go first in order to heal and assist in the healing of the masculine around us, the masculine within us first of all, and then the masculine that's reflected outwards, whether it's through relationships, through friendships, through any type of partnership, any type of relationship with our parents, however far it ripples out. With our children is one of the biggest things. With our children, creating new paradigms for our children. But the feminine is really here to rise as this healer through her leadership, through her intuition, through her heart, through her purity, through her love, through her compassion. And it's really about breaking down these old stories, these old narratives, these old paradigms. And it's not necessarily that they even need to completely crumble and collapse in order for new worlds to be born, in order for new stories to be born. We can see it's already happening.
Yeah.
It's already side by side, it's already happening. We're just being called into stronger leadership roles within ourselves to do the inner work first, because that which is within us is reflected out towards us. And so, like you were saying earlier, when we get into wounded partnerships, possibly through codependency and other traits, because that's what we've been raised in. That's all we've ever known, right? If we've had parents where we've had codependent relationships, or we've seen that, or it's been unhealthy for whatever reason because they've been in wounded energy, then we automatically draw those kind of relationships to us as healing invitations in order for us to be able to witness and see what's going on.
Correct.
I believe that every person, every relationship around us is a reflection within ourselves, reflecting something within us that needs healing. And it's just whether or not we have the conscious awareness to be able to see that in order to do better for ourselves, first and foremost, and then rise into our roles to do better for the world in whatever the way that we're guided to, so we can really be our best.
And very, you touching this a very specific point that I wanted to address it, and I have it in my notes, is how does masculine and energy influences attraction in relationships. And it's very, like what you said is so important, right? Because everything is interrelated. So we will attract our polarity, right? And when we are not coming from our healthy feminine and healthy masculine, then we will have those projections in the relationship, and that's when people are going to be triggered. And that's the purpose of being in union, to be able to heal that. And we are not going to be able to see it as much if we don't enter into intimate relationships, because this is where our deepest fears, our deepest insecurities get triggered, because it involves emotions, involve attachment, and all those narratives and stories that we carry from our childhood. So it's basically coming to life for us to see it, and as you mentioned, that's why it's so important to have that self-awareness. But we will build, or we will identify it and have the self-awareness when it's the right time. So it took me a few relationships to actually say, wait a minute, so let me take a step back and let me also reflect, like, what is happening here, and how I can be contributing to these dynamics. And it takes two to tango. It's always, two-way responsibility. And that's when I realized, all these things, and I started paying attention to my dynamics. So another important point is that when we wear multiple masks because of all the things that we went through in our childhood, society and our culture, it is harder to develop deep intimacy. So bring that polarity back, and then we will start understanding, how can we best support each other. So it's basically recognizing, right, our wounds, and being vulnerable, and just showing ourselves as who we are, instead of I'm perfect, I don't have any problems, I'm gonna be this strong person. If we come already with letting our ego dominate our intimate relationships, there's not gonna be deep intimacy created. So I think, like, even in my relationships, and we fluctuate. Sometimes we might be more into one energy and another. Maybe some of my relationships, I was more in my feminine. Those relationships were more stable. Those relationships were more deep, were also more intimate. Like there was deep intimacy and vulnerability. There were no masks. And it's when I started having, heartbreak and yeah, like going through pain, that you start building this, shield. And that's when, you start also not showing up as your most authentic self.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
You shared, so there's so many points that I want to kind of leap off from what you shared there.
Yeah.
The first one being that, as you were saying towards the end, in order for us to attract a divine masculine counterpart, we can't be in masculine energy.
Yeah.
Because it's like a magnet, right? Feminine and masculine will attract, and masculine and masculine will repel.
Mm-hmm.
So as the feminine, we need to be in that receptive state in order to draw and magnetize that divine masculine counterpart in.
Yeah.
And that can be through so many different energies. If you would consider money to be more of a masculine energy, it's being in that feminine receptive state to call and magnetize that energy into your field, in that divine counterpart, whether it's a relationship or it's money or whatever you want to consider, right? It's about being in that receptive state. But as you so rightly said, that when we experience any level of pain or trauma, any level of heartbreak, we have to be so consciously aware in those moments as well, to allow ourselves and be the masculine within our own feminine container, right? So we can feel everything and process our emotions,
yes,
powerfully and with sovereignty, in order to ride the wave of grief, ride the wave of heartbreak, to be able to find that powerful stance within ourselves once again, that clear, direct focus of connection within ourselves. We're grounded, we're present, we're here, we're alive, we're expressive. But more often than not, whenever we feel any level of pain, because it's so uncomfortable, we revert back to the same coping mechanisms that we would have used when we were a child, when we were made to feel wrong for something, and we were taught that it wasn't safe. If we weren't held in that safe masculine containership to feel our emotions, we were shut down, told we were too emotional, told that we weren't allowed to be sad or to cry or to scream or to be angry or to feel all of the feelings, then we remind ourselves that it's not safe. And so this is where cultivating that deep masculine presence within yourself, to be your own safe container, to hold you in that. If we imagine the feminine as the water, as the river, she flows. If she doesn't have a strong container, if she doesn't have strong riverbeds, then she's everywhere. She floats off into all different directions. But if she's got really strong foundations, a really strong foundation beneath her, really strong foundations either side of her, then she can move and flow where she needs to go, where she can feel all of her feels without drowning in her emotions, which is a wounded aspect of the feminine, is getting too caught up in the emotions, because there is no grounding, there is no connection, there is no coming back to self. You just get lost. And eventually you'll make it back, but then you'll tell yourself it's not safe to feel that anymore because you were drowning for so long.
Yeah, totally. And I think an also very important point here is, how can we ourselves hold space for these two energies, right? Because you were mentioning, in ourselves, we can bring that with our masculine energy, hold that space for the feminine, letting herself express, letting herself show emotions, letting herself be vulnerable, letting herself release control, flow, be intuitive, being in the nurturance space. What are your thoughts on how we can also hold space for the masculine from our feminine energy? So it is more when we are embodying more masculine. How can we start releasing that resistance and that control and embodying more our feminine? So how can our feminine hold space for our masculine?
Okay, I love that question. So I would say the remedy all across the board is coming back into the heart. It's so simple,
Yeah.
And it's so challenging all at the same time. Because when you begin to listen to the sound of your heart, what it has to share, how it feels, if you've not been taught how to handle that and how to hold that and how to express that, it can feel like a very scary thing to do, especially if you've been holding on to years and years of stagnant emotion that's still there, held in that space. It can feel like you're entering into a realm that's unsafe.
Yeah.
But beyond those shadow realms, within that darkness, there is so much magic to be found. There is so much treasure to be found. And really, for me, this has been a process from my own personal experience of awakening to higher states of consciousness within myself. So I would believe myself to be a soul having a human experience. Right? This is kind of like one of the foundational pieces of a spiritual journey. I'm a soul having a human experience. And so if I'm a soul who only knows divine love, who only lives on the frequency of love, I can hold that sacred space for myself to be all of my humanness, right? So the emotional experience is part of the human experience.
Yeah.
We don't have emotions necessarily in higher states of consciousness, because the closer we get to source, to God, to creator, to the divine, we remember that we are just pure love. And in that state of pure love, there is nothing that we cannot create. There is nothing that we cannot hold. There is nothing that we cannot experience. We are limitless. There is infinite potential. And so for me, the way that I've been able to handle and manage my own emotions, and I don't do it perfect 100% of the time. I have an emotional authority in human design. So emotions are a really big part of my journey, right? And all of us having a human experience. But it's about remembering that I am more than my emotions. I'm not defined by my emotions. My emotions are just a part of my experience.
Exactly.
Everything that I've experienced is just a part of my human experience, but I'm multidimensional. I exist on so many planes of existence.
Yeah.
There is so much more to me than this tiny little human suit.
Yeah.
When I was made aware and remembered these higher states of consciousness that I have the ability to access, that we all have the ability to access, because we all are pure divine love.
Yeah.
When we kind of really go down to the deep energetic level of what we are, we're just low frequency, then we have a greater capacity to hold ourselves, but it has to come through the heart, because the heart is the portal to the divine.
Yeah. And I think that that's, the part is linked. Coming to our heart is pretty much linked with coming to our essence. And when we come to our essence, we will embody who we really are. And when we embody who we really are, we will be operating more in our healthy feminine energy. And I think another point I wanted to touch as well, because it's very, very important, is emotions, right? And letting ourselves feel the emotions. And a very like key part in if you are going through your personal development journey, wherever you are at, if you just started, know that the first key is to, as Sarah said, not labeling your emotions. We tend to rationalize our emotions and make a sense of the emotions, but emotions are happening in a dimension that we cannot really understand. Emotions are waves of the past, present, of things that we experienced in the past that were stirring our nervous system and are coming into the present moment to deal with it, to help us mobilize. Emotions are sending us signs of taking action or changing away, or speaking up, or taking care of ourselves. There's so many ways that we can really start making our emotions play in favor of ourselves, and that's just getting out of our minds and getting more in tune with our body and letting our emotions flow, be felt, be released. And it's just, I know it sounds so simple, but it is that simple. It is really that simple, because the pain and the resistance, and this is something I really talk about a lot in my coaching, in my podcast, in my Instagram account, is that the pain and the suffering is not in the situation, but in the resisting of the emotion. Once we let ourselves feel the emotion, yeah, it's gonna be sad, yeah, we're gonna cry, yeah, there's gonna be grief, yeah, there's gonna be disappointment, there's gonna be any emotions, resistance, anger, but they are just emotions. Let them be expressed, and they go away. And that's how we keep growing and evolving. So the importance of this, and how we linked this with the topic of feminine and masculine, is the more you let yourself come into that heart that Sarah was mentioning, the more you are gonna allow yourself to feel, release any control, and just flow. And I think that's a very, very important part of coming back to our essence, which is pretty much linked. The other part, and probably the last point in the podcast that I wanted to touch on, is I wanted to let the people who are listening to us today, our community, is how we can create polarity and deepen intimacy in our relationships. So this is, of course, for women and men. So if your partner has more a feminine core, we are not labeling any genders. So if your partner has more feminine core, bring attention to your partner, reassurance and understanding to your relationship, and avoid making them feel unseen, unsafe, judged or misunderstood. Think of the feminine energy. I like to kind of think of the feminine energy as water, letting it flow, be free, unrestricted. And then the masculine is the cup that protects and supports it. And if your partner is more in the masculine core, bring admiration, bring appreciation and openness to the relationship. Avoid criticizing, controlling, or shutting down. I've seen that myself in my relationships. As soon as we do that, I've done that with my previous partners, they shut down. So vulnerability is what will pull that masculine back to you. And I know it can be scary, that's what we've been mentioning, but try to offer that freedom and love instead of that restriction. And is that freedom that will draw them back, because yeah, that's what the masculine craves as well, freedom and just admiration and appreciation. What are your thoughts there, Sarah?
I would really just love to add that this is a journey that begins within. I think that we've been so conditioned to find so many of the answers, and so much of what we feel is missing within ourselves, outside of ourselves.
Yeah.
So if you're looking for a partner, a divine partner to fill a certain part of you, you need to look at that inside yourself first. It's not to say that you can't grow alongside somebody and be both doing the growth work to then be able to come together in union, but the work really begins within yourself. That's not to say that you just keep being single until the end of time, until you feel you're ready, because there's never such a thing as being ready. You have to kind of be open to the signs and the synchronicities and the people that flow into your life and what they're here to teach you, and the mirrors and reflections that they're here to reflect back to you, and the lessons that you're being guided to learn. But please don't think, feel, believe that there is someone outside of you that holds the answer to something that you feel is missing within. It's about coming into inner divine union first, inner wholeness first, finding those pieces within yourself, being your own savior, being your own protector, being your own guide, being your own leader, being your own authority, being all of the things for you first, filling up your own cup first, and then trusting and knowing that through your divine feminine magnetism, you will call in the right person for you at that level that you're in.
I love it. Wow, that was really, really powerful. Yeah, I hope that yeah, everyone who is listening just really takes this message, because this is just the essence of the inner work. Just coming back to yourself and looking within, and just starting to bring back that most authentic self, that essence, that love, that compassion that you have within, and holding that same love and compassion and acceptance and understanding to others. But we cannot give to others what we don't have first within. So that's why Sarah says it starts from us. It starts from ourselves. That's why it's so important that in order for us to transform our external life, we first need to transform internally. So it all starts internally and expands externally. So beautiful, beautiful message. And I think that the last thing to add, which is in line with what we've talked, is take off the mask and be willing to show the beautiful human being that you are. We all come with our things, but when we love those things too, we don't give option to other people to not love that part of us. It's owning what we know we are working on, and accepting and bringing compassion, and just bringing that, your most authentic self. So thank you so much, Sarah, for joining me on this episode. I think it was a beautiful topic. Any last thing that you would like to mention, and also if you can let people know where they can contact you, and if you have any specific programs coming soon, feel free to also mention that.
Thank you. Yeah, one final piece that was just dropping in is just to remember that you were not created with broken pieces. You were not created missing anything. You were created whole and divine. And so everything that you're looking for is already within you. You just need to maybe dig a little bit deeper to find that treasure, to find that goal, to find that remembrance. When we look at children, we see them in their purest essence, and we don't think that they're broken or they're missing anything. It's about remember that divine essence that we have within ourselves. It's already there, waiting to be remembered. It's just about looking a little bit deeper.
Yeah, and it's that transformation, the last part is that transformation and light that we seek, that fulfillment is in direct proportion to how we are willing to look at our shadows. So the more we go there, the more we will experience also the polarity of the emotions. That's why this work is so important, because it is challenging, because people might ask, why am I gonna even go there? Because you keep saying it's very challenging. It is just challenging to face it, but once you are feeling it, it doesn't have any, it's not a rocket science, but the impact on, or the powerful part here is that you will experience also higher levels of happiness, of fulfillment, of peace, of transformation, of compassion, of love.
Yeah, 100%. It is short-term discomfort for long-term gain. You can sit in your unhealed trauma for a lifetime, feeling miserable, feeling sad, feeling unfulfilled. Or you can face something that maybe feels a little bit daunting to begin with, but will actually open you up to so much more beauty and magic and love and peace in your life. It requires you to just go beyond what feels comfortable in order to find yourself once again.
Yeah, beautiful. Perfect. So where can people find you on your social media?
So I'm mainly on Instagram, and that's at This Is Sarah Louise M. I've also got a website, www.sarahlouiseM.com. I'm still always updating that. So Instagram's probably the best place to find me. I'm currently running a free 5-day throat activation experience. So for those who are ready to step into their most authentic, truest selves, feel safe in their sensual, sacred self-expression, and feel safe to be seen and heard in all of who they are, then you can head on over to the link in my bio on my Instagram, find out more about that. I also have a really beautiful offering called Speak Your Soul, which begins on the 10th of October. And that is an expansion of what I'm doing this week in the free container, really about anchoring into your multidimensionality, every level of consciousness that you hold within to find yourself, and come back into that place of inner divine union within yourself to feel safe, to be seen and heard in the fullness of who you are.
Beautiful. So if you're listening to us, you cannot miss this opportunity to work with Sarah. She's amazing. And I will put also all your details into the description of the episode. Thank you again for being here. And
Thank you.
hopefully we will have you again.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you all for listening. We'll see you soon in another episode of the Awaken Women podcast.